Hi, this is Regina of Morale Fiber, and thanks for joining me for another crochet tutorial. Today is the waistcoat stitch, which is a type of crochet stitch that looks a lot like knitting once it's completed. The waistcoat stitch is done in the round, and it is built by working what is basically a normal single crochet, only we're working it in a different place. So we're going to be inserting our hook into a different place to work these single crochets, and that placement changes the look of the stitch, so it has this really nice knit-like look. On screen here I have the highlighted stitches. These stitches are the two vertical bars that make up the waistcoat stitch and makes them look like the knit stitch, as opposed to inserting our hook underneath the top two loops for traditional single crochet. Instead of going underneath those top two loops, we're going to go in between the two vertical bars, which I've now highlighted on the screen, and that's inserting our hook kind of through the single crochet of the round below. And waistcoat stitch is worked in the round. You can do it back and forth, but it doesn't look the same. So now that we've got an introduction, we're going to go ahead and start doing this on video. Here I've worked a sample of the waistcoat stitch, which is also, by the way, called the knit stitch, because it does look a bit like knitting with the way these stitches are arranged and how the vertical bars kind of form these V's that come out of each other, which look like the loops of knitting. So here's my little sample. I just built a little round tube in order to work these stitches. So in traditional single crochet, you would go under those top two loops. In waistcoat stitch, we're going to insert our hook through the vertical loops. I'm going to chain one to start. So through those vertical loops. Now, normally we go through the top two loops. So we've got our hook, and normally we would slide it underneath those top two loops in order to make a single crochet. So we'd be building off those top two loops for each stitch of the single crochet of the round by inserting our hook under those and drawing up a loop. Now for waistcoat stitch, we're going to put our hook actually through those two vertical bars like the ones I showed on screen at the beginning. So we're really inserting our hook through the body of that single crochet stitch below. And it does take some practice at first to get your hook through that space. See, and I've yarned over and brought my loop up through that space, and I'm going to yarn over and draw through two loops, just like with a regular single crochet, except we're working it by inserting our hook through those vertical loops. We have to push through some fabric to do this because this is through the body of the stitch. It's thicker. When we come out the other side, it's going to look like it's going through the crochet stitch. And it's a little bit tricky to explain, but see on the back here, each crochet stitch has these two little bars that are kind of opposite the bars on the front. So they form this upside down V on the back, whereas on the front you have this right side up V. But either way, your hook is going to be in between the vertical bars of that V. So when you bring your hook out the back, it's going to look like that back of that stitch is like straddling your hook. And I'm going to pause for a moment and bring up some visual aids on screen here. So here's an image of the waistcoat stitch sample with the two vertical bars of a single waistcoat stitch highlighted. And your hook is going to go in between those two vertical bars and push through the back of the stitch. Here's the hook inserted with one of the vertical bars visible, highlighted on screen, and here's what the back of the work looks like. And here's the back of those stitches as I was describing them, like an upside down V. That little white dot is where your hook is going to emerge at the back of the work through that single crochet stitch, not through the top 2 loops. And here's a demo. I'm continuing to work this waistcoat stitch by inserting my hook through those vertical loops. And a successful waistcoat stitch will have that nice stacked V that we showed at the beginning, so it is going to mimic the look of knit stitches. Here's that example on screen again with the waistcoat stitches lined up and the texture, the kind of composition of those stitches are highlighted. And it's a little tricky at first. You're going to feel like you're kind of messing up the single crochet stitch because you do have to push through the body of the stitch. If you'll watch me working, you can see that I will put my finger behind that stitch as kind of a stopper for that. And I've also found it helps to go in at sort of an angle, so you're not going to want to go straight back from front to back, but rather just slightly toward your yarn hand, angle it that way. It's a little easier to get into that stitch. So that's the basics of waistcoat or knit crochet stitch. This stitch is the same in every other way except for where you place your hook when you make this stitch. And I love to use this stitch for hats. It makes a really firm, beautifully even surface. Here on screen is a hat I've got coming up. It's not released yet. This hat pattern is the start of my vintage derby pattern, which is a free pattern and also available as a paid PDF, and I'll link that pattern below. It is one of my favorite little hat patterns. And the former hat I showed on screen, I'll link that as soon as that pattern is released. So I hope you liked this little demo and found it helpful. And please visit my blog for more patterns. Thanks.